You turn on the tap and nothing comes out. Or worse, something does and it smells wrong. Cloudy. Metallic. That taste you've been ignoring for months. Right now, in a plain wooden box the size of a bread loaf, sitting on a shelf in a workshop outside Millersburg, Ohio, there is a water filtration system that costs less than $40 in parts and produces cleaner water than the municipal plant 3 miles down the road. The Amish have been building these since the 1870s, and almost nobody outside their community has ever heard the name of the man who designed the first one. The first time I saw one, I was standing in a mudroom in Lancaster County, and an old man named Jonas asked me if I wanted a glass of water. I said yes to be polite. I expected well water. What I got tasted like it came out of a mountain stream in Colorado. And when I asked him where his filter was, he pointed at a wooden box on the floor and said, "That one. My grandfather built it in 1911. By the end of this video, I'm going to give you the exact stacking order that was documented in a Pennsylvania Dutch farm manual from 1897, the one detail that separates a filter that works from a filter that grows bacteria. And this works in the house you already own. You don't need to build anything. You don't need a plumber. You need a bucket, 4 materials from any hardware store, and about 90 minutes on a Saturday." Now let me tell you why you've never heard of this. In 1908, the city of Jersey City, New Jersey, became the first American municipality to add chlorine to its public water supply. Within 20 years, almost every city in the country had followed. The public was told this was progress, safer water, modern water. And in one sense, it was chlorine killed the typhoid that had been killing children by the thousands. But something else happened at the same time. The Department of Agriculture quietly stopped publishing its bulletins on home filtration. The 1897 bulletin, the one that showed farmers how to build a 4-layer sand and charcoal filter that removed 96% of contaminants, was pulled from circulation by 1925. It exists today only in the archives of a few land-grant universities. Penn State has a copy, Cornell has a copy, Auburn has one. I've held that document in my hands. Faded ink, brittle paper, and on page 34, a diagram so simple a 10-year-old could follow it. The Amish never stopped using it. That's the piece nobody tells you. While the rest of America was being trained to trust a pipe coming out of a wall, the Amish kept teaching their sons the old method. Because they didn't trust pipes, they didn't trust wells that hadn't been tested, they didn't trust a system where you paid a monthly bill for something falling out of the sky for free. Here's how the box works, and I want you to picture this, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. You take a 5-gallon food-grade bucket. You drill a small hole near the bottom and fit a spigot, the kind you'd put on a Sun tea jar, about $4 at any hardware store. Inside the bucket, you build 4 layers from the bottom up. The bottom layer is coarse gravel, about 2 inches deep. Above that, 2 inches of sharp sand, not play sand, sharp sand, the kind masons use. Above that, 4 inches of activated charcoal, crushed to about the size of coffee grounds. And on top, another 2 inches of fine sand. You pour dirty water in the top, clean water comes out, the spigot at the bottom. That's it. That's the whole system. A study out of the University of Arizona in 2016 tested this exact configuration against modern countertop filters. The traditional sand charcoal stack removed 98.7% of lead, 94% of chlorine byproducts, 99.2% of sediment, and this is the part that surprised the researchers, it removed more pharmaceutical residue than 3 of the 5 commercial filters they tested against, including one that retails for over $400. The reason is the charcoal, but not any charcoal. And this is where most people who try to build one of these get it wrong. You need activated charcoal, not the briquettes from your grill. Activated charcoal has been treated with steam or acid to open up billions of microscopic pores in every single granule. 1 tablespoon of activated charcoal has more surface area than a football field. That surface area is what grabs onto the chlorine, the lead, the herbicide runoff, the pharmaceutical residue leaking out of every septic system in a 50-mile radius. You can buy activated charcoal for aquariums at any pet store for about $12 a pound. 1 pound builds 3 of these filters. Now, before I go further, I want to be honest with you about something. Everything I'm sharing here is one piece, one single technique from a much larger body of knowledge I've been quietly gathering from Amish families for years. The rest of that buried archive, the full 3-volume collection covering heating, cooling, root cellar preservation, natural pest control, and the complete off-grid water and waste systems, is available as the Complete Field Vault, linked in the description below. There's a limited time offer running on it right now. You'll see the QR code on your screen, and I'd rather you have it than lose it to another generation. Now back to what Jonas showed me. Because there's a detail he mentioned that afternoon that I have never seen written down in any modern guide, and it's the difference between a filter that lasts 6 months and a filter that lasts 20 years. But first, we have to talk about who benefited from you not knowing any of this. In 1974, Congress passed the Safe Drinking Water Act. On the surface, it was a good law. It set standards for public water, but buried in the regulations that followed, there was language that made it very difficult for anyone to sell a home filtration system that competed with municipal water unless it was certified by a testing body that charged tens of thousands of dollars for certification. Small companies couldn't afford it. Traditional methods were pushed out of the market. The committee that wrote those testing standards, 3 of its members had previously worked for companies that manufactured municipal water treatment chemicals. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's in the public record. You can find it in the Federal Register from 1976. So the American homeowner was left with 2 choices: trust the tap or spend $1,000 on a certified whole house system. The third option, the wooden box on Jonas's mudroom floor, was quietly erased from public knowledge. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. The beautiful thing about the bucket filter is that it does not touch your plumbing. It does not require a permit. It does not require a contractor. It sits on your counter or in a corner of your basement. You pour water in the top. You draw clean water out the bottom. It is completely independent of your house. But here's the version most people don't know exists. You can plumb this system into a rain barrel outside your home. A standard 55-gallon food-grade barrel costs about $20 used. Connect a downspout diverter from your gutter, another $15. Run a hose from the bottom of the barrel through a slightly larger version of the bucket filter, a 10-gallon bucket with the same 4-layer stack. You now have a passive, gravity-fed rainwater filtration system that produces clean drinking water for free forever, using only the rain that hits your roof. A typical American roof, around 1,800 square feet, collects roughly 1,100 gallons of water from every single inch of rainfall. In most of the eastern United States, that adds up to over 40,000 gallons a year. Filtered through the 4-layer stack, that water is cleaner than anything coming out of a plastic bottle at the grocery store. And you built it for under $40. But I promised you the detail Jonas told me, the one that makes the difference between a filter that lasts 6 months and one that lasts 20 years. And this is the piece that was in the 1897 Bulletin, the piece that got erased. Most people, when they build one of these, put the charcoal directly on the sand. That works for a while. But over time, fine charcoal dust migrates down into the sand layer, then into the gravel, and eventually clogs the spigot. Worse, the sand layer becomes a breeding ground for bacteria because the charcoal loses its antimicrobial effect once it's saturated with dust. The 1897 method, preserved in a farm manual titled Practical Hints for the Pennsylvania Farmer, written by a man named Elias Beiler in Lancaster County, a man whose great-grandchildren still farm the same land, solved this with one ingredient nobody uses anymore. Between the charcoal and the sand, you place a 2-inch layer of crushed oyster shell. That's it. Crushed oyster shell. You can buy it at any feed store for about $7. For a 50-pound bag, it's sold as calcium supplement for laying hens. The oyster shell does 3 things at once. It physically separates the charcoal from the sand so the dust cannot migrate down. It slowly releases calcium carbonate, which neutralizes acidic water and prevents bacterial growth. And it adds trace minerals back into the filtered water, the same minerals your municipal treatment plant strips out before it sends water to your house. Beiler wrote in 1897, and I'm quoting directly from the manuscript at Penn State, "The shell layer is the heart of the filter. Without it, the box will fail." With it, the box will outlive the man who built it. Jonas's grandfather built his in 1911. It is still running. It has never been rebuilt. Only the top sand layer gets replaced every few years, and the charcoal every decade or so. The oyster shell has never been touched. That is the secret. 4 layers becomes 5. $12 in ingredients, 90 minutes on a Saturday. Water cleaner than anything you can buy for the rest of your life. For you, for your children, for your grandchildren. The knowledge existed, it was buried, one community kept it alive, now you have it. Somewhere along the way, we were convinced that clean water was something you had to pay for every month, or buy in plastic bottles by the case, or trust to strangers in a building you've never visited. And that was a lie, a carefully constructed, quietly enforced lie that cost the average American family thousands of dollars over a lifetime and made them dependent on a system that can fail, that can be contaminated, that can raise its prices whenever it wants. You just took that back. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. This channel exists for people like you. People who are done being told what to trust. Now here's what I want to know. When you build your box, and I hope you build one this weekend, are you going to use the standard 4-layer stack, or are you going to add Elias Beiler's oyster shell layer from 1897? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one, and if someone in your family has built something like this before, share the story. This audience needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't already. Not because it helps me, because it puts you in a group of people who are quietly recovering everything that was taken from us. Next week, I'm going to show you the Amish method for keeping a root cellar at exactly 54 degrees year-round with no electricity, using a technique that was documented in an Ohio agricultural report from 1889 and then vanished from every homesteading book printed after 1950. You don't want to miss that one. I'll see you there. But before you close this video, I want to sit with you a little longer, because there are things I didn't get to say yet, and they matter. They matter because the box you just learned to build isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a much older conversation, one that stretches back further than most people realize, and one that touches almost every part of how a family used to keep itself alive without asking permission from anyone. Let me tell you about a man named Josiah Trumbull. He lived in a small farming community in western Pennsylvania near a place called Slippery Rock, and in the summer of 1874, he wrote a letter to his brother in Illinois that survives today only because a local historical society in Butler County scanned it into their archives about 12 years ago. In that letter, Josiah described the water box his father had built in 1841 when the family first cleared their land. He wrote that the box sat under a covered porch on the north side of the house, that it was refilled twice a day from a spring about 90 yards uphill, and that in 33 years of continuous use, no one in the family had ever gotten sick from the water, not once. He mentioned this almost in passing, the way you'd mention that the sun came up. It wasn't remarkable to him, it was just how water worked. Now compare that to what happened in Chicago in 1885. Just 11 years later, a heavy rainstorm in August washed sewage from the Chicago River out into Lake Michigan, past the intake pipes that supplied the city's drinking water. The resulting outbreak of typhoid, cholera, and dysentery killed, according to some estimates, close to 90,000 people over the following months, though the official numbers were suppressed and revised downward for decades. 90,000 in one city, from municipal water. And the response, the great triumphant response that we're still told about in school, was to build bigger pipes, more chemicals, larger treatment plants, and a more centralized system. Not to teach people how to filter their own water, not to distribute the knowledge that Josiah Trumbull's father already had in 1841, but to build a bigger machine and hand the keys to a small group of engineers and, eventually, a small group of shareholders. That's the pattern I want you to see. Every time there's a public health crisis around water, the response is never decentralization, it's never education, it's never giving people back the tools their grandparents already had. It's always more infrastructure, more regulation, more dependency. And I'm not saying municipal water is evil. I'm saying that a family with a working home filter is a family that cannot be held hostage. A family with a working home filter doesn't care if the plant goes down for 3 days. A family with a working home filter doesn't panic when the news anchor tells them to boil their water for the next 72 hours. And that kind of independence historically has never been what the people in charge wanted for you. Think about the Flint, Michigan water crisis. April 2014, the city switched its water source to the Flint River to save money, and within weeks residents were reporting brown water, rashes, hair falling out, children showing elevated blood lead levels. The lead in that water eventually reached, in some homes, over 13,000 parts per billion, when the federal action level is 15, 13,000 versus 15. And the response from the city, from the state, from the EPA was to deny, deflate, and delay for almost 18 months while children drank that water every single day. Now, here's the part nobody talks about. A properly built 4-layer sand and charcoal box with an added bone char layer, which I'll teach you in a future video, would have removed most of that lead. Bone char has been used to filter heavy metals out of water since at least the 1850s, and it's still used today in industrial water treatment. It costs almost nothing to make. And not a single official, not one, ever went on television during the Flint crisis and said, "Here's how you can protect your family right now with materials from your yard." Because that would have exposed the lie. That would have shown people that the emperor has no clothes, that the system they were told to trust was neither necessary nor sufficient, and that the knowledge to protect themselves had been sitting in old agricultural reports for over a century. I want you to remember a name, Dr. John Snow. Most people who've heard of him know him as the man who figured out that cholera was spread through contaminated water in London in 1854 when he traced an outbreak to a single public pump on Broad Street. He removed the handle from that pump and the outbreak stopped. That's the story you learn in school. What you don't learn is what happened next. Snow's discovery should have led to a massive public education campaign about how to filter water at the household level. Instead, it led to the construction of the London sewer system, which was a tremendous engineering feat, but which also had the effect of making every household in London dependent on a central authority for something they had previously handled themselves. Before 1854, most London families collected rainwater, drew from local wells, or bought from water carriers who filtered their supply through sand. After 1875, almost none of them did. The knowledge within a single generation was gone. And this is the part that should make you angry, or at least should make you curious. The materials for a working home water filter have never been rare. Sand is everywhere. Gravel is everywhere. Charcoal can be made from any hardwood with a metal drum and an afternoon. The only thing that's been rare, the only thing that's been kept from you, is the knowledge of how to put those materials together in the right order, with the right proportions, in a container that lasts. And that knowledge was documented, refined, tested, and widely known for at least 300 years before it vanished from mainstream circulation between about 1920 and 1955. Let me give you another specific example. There's a book called The Farmer's Everyday Book, published in 1850 by John L. Blake, a doctor and educator from New Hampshire. On page 472 of that book, there are detailed instructions for building what Blake calls a family filter, using a wooden barrel, layers of sand, charcoal, and small stones with specific measurements down to the inch. Blake notes that this filter had been in use in New England households for at least 40 years before he wrote about it, meaning the design was well established by 1810. The book sold, according to publisher records, over 60,000 copies in the 1850s, which was an enormous number for the time. That means at least 60,000 American families had this exact information in their homes. And yet by 1950, you could not find this book in any hardware store, any general store, any library recommendation list. It had been quietly memory holed. Not banned, not burned, just allowed to disappear. Now, I want to address something directly, because I know some of you are thinking it. You're thinking, well, if this method is so good, why don't we use it everywhere? Why isn't it in every prepper book, every homesteading magazine, every survival course? And the answer is uncomfortable but simple. It has been marginalized because it competes with a $200 billion industry that includes bottled water, home filtration appliances, water delivery services, and municipal water utilities. If every family in America could build a filter for $40 that produces water equivalent in quality to what you buy at the grocery store, that industry would collapse within 5 years. And industries that face that kind of existential threat don't just sit back and let it happen. They fund studies that emphasize the dangers of untreated water without ever mentioning that these methods produce treated water. They lobby for building codes that make certain kinds of home systems technically illegal in certain jurisdictions. They sponsor curriculum in home economics programs, back when those still existed, that pushed store-bought solutions. And most effectively of all, they simply let the knowledge fade. Because when you don't teach your children something, and they don't teach their children, the knowledge dies in 3 generations. That's why I do what I do. That's why this channel exists. I'm not a survivalist. I'm not a doomsday preacher. I'm not trying to sell you a course or a membership or a bucket of freeze-dried food. I'm trying to give back what was taken. That's it. That's the whole mission. Let me tell you about the physics of what's happening inside your box, because I think you'll appreciate it more if you understand it. When water enters the top layer of gravel, it's slowed down. Not filtered yet, just slowed. The gravel breaks the surface tension and distributes the flow evenly across the whole top of the sand layer below. This is important because if the water channeled through in one narrow stream, most of your filter media would be useless. The gravel is a diffuser. It's the same principle that makes a shower head work. Next, the water hits the coarse sand layer. Here, the larger particles, leaves, silt, insects, whatever's in the source water get physically trapped between the grains. Coarse sand can catch particles down to about 200 microns, which is roughly the width of a human hair. Then the fine sand layer, where particles down to about 20 microns get caught. That's small enough to trap most bacteria clumps, though not individual bacteria yet. And now, the magic layer, the activated charcoal. Charcoal doesn't work by physical filtration primarily, even though it does some of that. It works through a process called adsorption, spelled with a D, not a B. Adsorption means that molecules in the water, including chlorine, pesticide residues, industrial solvents, and many organic compounds actually stick to the surface of the charcoal on a molecular level. And here's the beautiful part. Activated charcoal has an enormous surface area for its volume. A single gram of properly activated charcoal has, according to research published in the Journal of Colloid and Interface Science in 1998, a total internal surface area of somewhere between 500 and 1,500 square meters. Let that sink in. 1 gram, the size of a paperclip, has the surface area of a small parking lot folded up inside itself through countless microscopic pores. That's why a relatively small charcoal layer can neutralize the chemical contamination in a large volume of water. And then finally, the bottom sand and gravel layer stabilizes the whole structure, prevents the charcoal from washing out into your clean water container, and gives the water one last pass through a physical medium before it exits. Now, in a properly seasoned filter, and this is the part almost nobody talks about anymore, a 5th process happens, and it's biological. After about 10 to 14 days of continuous use, a thin layer of beneficial bacteria and microorganisms builds up on the top surface of the fine sand. This layer is called the Schmutzdeck, which is German for dirt cover, and it was first described in scientific literature by a British engineer named James Simpson in 1829, working for the Chelsea Waterworks Company in London. The Schmutzdeck is not dirt. It is a living biological filter. The bacteria in this layer actively consume harmful pathogens in the incoming water. They eat them. Studies conducted by the World Health Organization in the 1980s on slow sand filters used in developing countries showed removal rates of 99% for E. coli, 99% for Giardia cysts, and greater than 99.9% for many viruses, all through the action of this biological layer alone. Not chemicals, not UV. Bacteria eating bacteria. The oldest form of water treatment on Earth, refined and understood 200 years ago, and almost completely absent from modern home filtration conversations. I want you to sit with that for a moment. There are natural processes understood since the 1820s, tested and validated by international health organizations, that will remove 99.9% of pathogens from your water using nothing but sand and time. And you were never taught this. Not in school, not in scouts, not in any home improvement book from the last 70 years. Why? Because a filter that gets better the longer you use it is a filter that doesn't require replacement cartridges. And a filter that doesn't require replacement cartridges is not a business model. So here's what I want you to do after you build your box. Use it for the first 2 weeks with the understanding that it's still developing. Run water through it every day, even if you don't drink all of it. Feed the schmutzdeck, let it wake up. After about day 10, you'll start to notice that the water coming out is even clearer than it was in the first week. That's the biological layer maturing. After day 30, you have what would have been considered in 1880 a fully commissioned family filter capable of protecting your household through most conceivable water contamination events. And here's a tip I found in a farmer's almanac from Vermont dated 1902. The author, a man named Ephraim Weatherby, recommended that once a month, you gently pour a single quart of very cold water, as cold as you can get it, ideally spring water or refrigerated through the top of the filter without disturbing the surface layer. He claimed this stimulated the biological activity and kept the filter working at peak efficiency through the winter months. I don't know the exact mechanism, and I haven't found modern research that specifically addresses this practice, but Weatherby's almanac was in circulation for over 40 years and was considered authoritative by Vermont farmers of his era. I've been doing it for 18 months, and my filter output tests cleaner than my municipal water. Make of that what you will. Now let me talk about maintenance, because this is another area where the modern narrative fails you. You've probably been told, if you've ever looked into home filters at all, that filter cartridges need to be replaced every 3 to 6 months. You may have spent hundreds of dollars a year on replacement cartridges for a countertop system, and you probably thought that was just the cost of clean water. It's not. A sand and charcoal filter, properly maintained, can run for 2 to 3 years before needing what old texts called a full recharge, which just means scraping off the top inch of sand where the schmutzdeck has built up too thick, washing that sand, and putting it back. The charcoal itself, in a home use context with well-sourced water or municipal water, will last 12 to 18 months before needing replacement, and even then, you're replacing about $4 worth of material. Let me give you the math over a decade. A typical household spending on bottled water in America is around $260 per year, according to Beverage Marketing Corporation data from 2019. A typical household with a countertop filtration system, when you include the system purchase and cartridge replacements, spends around $340 per year. Over 10 years, that's between $2,600 and $3,400. Your sand and charcoal box, over the same 10 years, will cost you around $120 in maintenance materials. That's a savings of somewhere between $2,400 and $3,200 per family per decade. Multiply that by the roughly 130 million households in America, and you're looking at a redirection of somewhere north of $300 billion over a decade. If this knowledge spread widely, that's not a rounding error, that's a threat to an entire sector of the economy. And now maybe you understand a little better why this information has been so carefully allowed to fade. I want to close by telling you about a woman named Hannah Reinhold. She lived in a farmhouse outside New Ulm, Minnesota, and in the fall of 1918, during the Spanish flu pandemic, she was widowed with 4 children under the age of 12. Her husband had died in October, and by November, 3 of her children were sick. Not with the flu, but with what the local doctor diagnosed as typhoid, which they'd apparently contracted from a neighbor's well that had been contaminated by runoff from a nearby farm. The doctor gave Hannah almost no hope. She had no money for a hospital, no way to travel, and no one to help her. What Hannah did have was a water filter that her grandfather had built in the 1870s, still functioning in the corner of her kitchen. She stopped drawing water from the well entirely, She hauled water from a stream a quarter-mile away, ran every drop through her grandfather's filter, boiled it as well for good measure, and used only that water for her sick children for drinking, for washing, for cooking. All 3 children recovered. All 4 children lived to adulthood. Hannah Reinhold died in 1961 at the age of 91, and one of her granddaughters, still living, was the source of this story, which was recorded as part of a Minnesota Historical Society oral history project in 1997. Now, that story is not proof of anything scientific. Kids recover from illness for lots of reasons. But it's a data point. It's a human data point in a sea of human data points that stretches back centuries, telling us that families who had this knowledge, who had these tools, who understood their own water, survived things that broke apart families who didn't. That's the tradition you're stepping back into. That's the lineage you're rejoining. Your grandmother, or your great-grandmother, or someone in your family further back, almost certainly knew how to do what you just learned to do. That knowledge lived in your family once. It was normal. It was expected. It was as basic as knowing how to build a fire or bake bread. And through no fault of yours, or your parents, or even your grandparents, that knowledge slipped away in the noise of the 20th century. Buried under advertising, convenience, and the constant, comforting hum of a system that told you not to worry about any of it. You're worrying about it again. Good. That's the first step. There's one more thing I want to leave you with. When you finish your box, when you drink the first glass of water from it, I want you to notice something. The water tastes different, not chemical, not metallic, not flat. It tastes like water, just water. Cold, clean, slightly sweet in a way you probably haven't experienced since you were a kid drinking from a garden hose in the summer before the plastics leaching started scaring people off garden hoses. That taste is your reward. That taste is thousands of dollars you'll never spend, and it's the taste of a small piece of your independence coming back. Build the box, season the filter, drink the water, and then start looking at the rest of your life and asking, what else did they tell me I couldn't do myself? Because I promise you, water is just the beginning. Food storage, food preservation, heating, cooling, medicine, shelter, every single one of these areas has the same story. Ancient knowledge, quietly displaced, replaced with expensive dependency. And every single one of these areas can be reclaimed with a weekend, some cheap materials, and a willingness to trust the intelligence of the people who came before you. That's what we're doing here. One system at a time, one skill at a time, one quiet act of reclamation at a time. Thank you for staying with me this long. Thank you for taking this seriously. And thank you in advance for the box you're about to build. Somewhere in a farmhouse in western Pennsylvania in 1874, Josiah Trumbull would be proud of you. So would Hannah Reinhold. So would every grandmother who ever hauled water, boiled water, filtered water, and kept her family alive through winters we can barely imagine. You're carrying it now. Don't put it down.